Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. So we're here for our weekly monk chat. I don't know about you, but I always get excited about monk chat. So today we have with us Ayasoma, who is also looking pretty excited. Bhante J, not so excited. Okay, that's better. And Bhante Sudaso, very excited. So we'll start by paying homage to the Buddha, and then we'll go through your questions. So please go ahead and start typing in questions, and we'll take them in the order received. So we'll start by paying homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sangham namasami. Okay, let's see what sort of questions we have today. So, Rick says, I struggle with finding the right attitude or approach to take towards practice. I am committed to the path, but my perspective changes when I think liberation is possible in this life. First thinking liberation will take several more lifetimes. Do you have any guidance? Ayasoma, what do you think?
Well, just check what it does to your mind. What are the effects? So if you think liberation is possible in this life, and you're like, yes, let me, put a lot of effort in meditation, effort in studying, effort in eradicating these defilements, and you actually do make progress towards that goal, then great. Focus on liberation in this lifetime. If that makes you anxiety and then you're like, oh dear, I suck at this, I'm terrible, I'm horrible, I'd rather go to the bar and get drunk so I don't think about how much I suck at practice, well then relax. And just think that just by practicing, maybe it's going to take a few lifetimes, maybe it's going to take just this one lifetime, doesn't matter, but you're just practicing, you're going in that direction, and eventually you're going to get there. So in that case, you'll just relax. Actually, in both cases, just relax. But yeah, just do that type of evaluation in your mind, and then you'll see what are the best thoughts essentially to entertain in your mind. I like to think about it's possible in this lifetime. It really encourages me.
I like to think it's okay if it takes several lifetimes. Actually, I find, as Ayasoma was saying, I find both of these perspectives helpful. They're just helpful at different times, depending upon one's state of mind. And Dharma Learner says, after listening to the double meaning verse taken from the Dhammapada in the morning program, can you expand on why the Buddha would use puns and humor for teachings, when it seems humor is something upon in many Buddhist centers, maybe looked down upon or frowned upon? Yeah. Bhante J, what do you think? Why would the Buddha use puns and humor when humor is looked down upon in many Buddhist centers?
From the perspective of the early text, I don't think that humor is looked down upon. I think it's like anyone who knows human nature knows that humor is a useful tool for getting a point across. Right? Look at today, we have these things called memes, right? People post these pictures. And, now we turn them into Dhamma memes, right? You can put all kinds of Buddhist memes and they're funny, right? But they have a message. That's the point. The message is when you get like, it's like a little bit of a punch, right? It's like, it's kind of like the same way, like the Buddha will say, this is how you should think about eating. You should think about it like you're eating your child, right? And you're like, oh my God, that's horrible. It's a punch, right? Humor is a punch. It's a way of conveying a message that goes deep, right? And if you were somebody who was at the time of the Buddha and you heard this and you understood that because it was part of your culture and then you understood like that little double message, double meaning in one shot. That's really genius, right? And it's also like, it's really an economy of words too, because you can reflect on two different things from one set of words, right? So of course, people like to laugh. That's how it's always been. That's how it always is. And the Buddha even says it, the one sutta, was it Rata Sutta, where where you get the whole laughter is madness and things like that. The Buddha says that it's enough to just, give a smile or something like that, right? It's perfectly okay to smile and have a little fun and be mirthful. And, humor is look at like Ajahn Brahm, right? Mm-hmm. Ajahn Brahm is a key example of somebody whose message was perfect for like Westerners, right? It's just somebody who's like comes on, tells silly jokes, right? But people love it. And I loved it. It was perfect for me in the early days, So no, humor, if used skillfully, can be a very good tool for the Dhamma. The same thing with, when somebody comes to the monastery and I'm just getting to know them, I'll talk about like, oh, hey, where are you from? What did you do? What did you like? And people always say, oh, no, that's just useless, stupid talk. But no, actually, it connects you with somebody, right? It builds upon something, then later you can have a connection with somebody that you can speak Dhamma with. So no, I think it's a useful tool.
And Jaykala says, do the Venerables have any upaya suggestions for letting go of and managing papancha sanya sankha surrounding personal projects and things one has spent a long time making that aren't necessarily physical? I think this is actually a great question for Ayasoma.
No, I was thinking actually that was a great question for you, Bhante.
Oh. Stop taking yourself so seriously. Like all that stuff that you make up in your mind is pointless. It's a complete waste of time. And it's not original. You think you're inventing creative stuff. You're not. You're just mimicking the same junk that's been spinning around in samsara since beginningless time. You've never created anything in your life.
Okay, maybe.
I mean, you should have known that's the answer I would give. You've known me for long enough.
Okay, Jaykala, don't take it personally. But actually, you're becoming a monastic next year, so I think you're ready for Bhante's answer. That's fine. It's okay.
I also give that answer to lay people, for the record.
Yes. There's an animated look in the audience.
Y'all need to stop taking yourself so seriously.
That's a side effect of the practice.
Yeah.
You take yourself less seriously.
Totally. So Richard says, I understand that apart from the Buddha's dreams, that dreams are typically viewed as mental activity. I've had very vivid dreams every single night since a child, some of which have been prescient. I've typically dismissed them as an annoying quirk. In the last month, however, the sudden theme of those vivid dreams have revolved around family members and friends, dead and alive from my past, who I haven't been in contact with in years or even thought about consciously. I noticed this change as my recent time was increasingly spent each day practicing sati and sampajanya, meditation, reading suttas, Dhamma talks, lots of metta. Any correlation? Is this a nothing burger?
Yeah, it's like, is there any meaning to it? Does it mean anything? It's like, is it just nothing, or is it?
Is it progress or is it regression? One of you want to take this?
What is Buddha's dreams? Is this something from?
Mahayana? No. Remember the Buddha's, before the Buddha attained awakening, he had the dream of the signs, where they were signs that he would attain full awakening. Like the one where he had like the dream of all the insects crawling on his body.
That's in the suttas.
Yeah, Mahasupina Sutta, the great dreams. The Buddha had these four. I can dig it up. I think it's in the Gotra Nikaya, Book of the Fours or Fives. It's the prescient dreams the Buddha had shortly before attaining awakening.
Clearly, we're not very big on dreams here.
That's weird. I mean,
It's remarkable as being one of the very few places in the suttas where the Buddha talks about dreams in a positive way.
Yeah.
Normally, the Buddha talks about dreams as being useless mental noise to be disregarded. This is one of the very few places where he talks about it as in any kind of meaningful way.
I'm surprised that I have no recollection of that at all.
I could actually find it easily enough, but
it's not a big deal for me.
Anyway,
but
so
I don't dream pretty much, or I don't remember my dreams. So
I do remember my dreams pretty much every night. But yeah, I mean, dreams, for the most part, it's just papancha while you're sleeping. But yeah, the Buddha also said that on rare occasion, the dreams that we have are messages from devas, or sometimes they're some kind of mental process, which actually does have genuine content to it. But most of the time, it is just mental noise. It's not to be taken seriously. So you're having some dreams? Well, that's fine. But much more important is, what are you doing while you're awake?
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Let's see, next question. One whole of a guy says, I missed in the panel the other day. WRT
with
ordaining?
regard to.
Oh.
Wow, I'm getting good at acronyms
Good
after
job,
15 years. I'm pretty proud of myself.
I've never seen this one before. So with regard to ordaining, what are your thoughts on deciding where to go forth? What about choosing a place in the West versus in Asia?
Well, if you have a female body, it's very easy because there are like 4 places. So it's like whichever is the closest one. Choice is not happiness, as Ajahn Sumedho says. So actually, I think it's really great to have least amount of opportunities. If, on the other hand, you have the more popular body in ordination circles, then you got to be actually really, really careful, because since there is a lot of opportunities, depending on your karmic conditions, there's a big chance that actually you can fall in a really like bad sort of lineage or ordination. So you better do your research. And thoughts on deciding? Well, don't waste too much time. So I would say visit a few places maybe, and get a sense of different types of practice, and whatever kind of inspires you, where you feel the most comfortable. So if you feel more comfortable in a forest monastery, or if you feel more comfortable actually perhaps in a city monastery, if you have more of a devotional practice, or if you have like perhaps you struggle a lot with being isolated. Usually in forest monasteries, there's definitely for the first couple of years as a monastic, you won't really get to interact much with the public. And a lot of people, apparently, I've seen struggle a lot with that. So maybe you need something a little bit more active, or also it depends if you have, I think for maybe the suttas, then maybe Sri Lanka might be. Usually there's more emphasis on studying the suttas as opposed to in Thailand, there's more emphasis on the Vinaya. These are kind of like, how do you say,
generalizations.
Generalizations, yeah. But kind of see a few places, but don't like spend years and years going to every single place trying to find the perfect community. Because newsflash, the perfect community does not exist. But there are some conditions that are more suitable than others. And yeah, once you find the place that feels all right, that you think you can progress with, just briefly Google it, search, see that it doesn't have some crazy kind of like story of abuse or of scandals, etc. These days, it's very easy to do that. Literally, you just put the name of the teacher and then the name of the center, and then go forth. Just do it.
Great. And TJ has a question about something from the suttas. When one is gladdened, rapture is born. When the mind is uplifted by rapture, the body becomes tranquil, ... experiences happiness, ... becomes concentrated. So Samyutta Nikaya 35.97. And TJ asks, does the chain of these 5 Dhamma Samadhis go automatically after arousing gladness, pamoja, or rapture, piti, based on your experience? No. You do actually have to put some effort into it. So one thing I've noticed over the years is that a lot of people expect their meditation to just kind of progress automatically on its own. But you actually do have to put some effort into it. So meditation practice is a mixture of putting forth effort and relaxing. And you need to know when to increase the effort and when you need to increase the relaxation. And yeah, so you can actually just sit there and relax, and your entire lifetime can go by and you're not one step closer to awakening. You can also sit there and struggle and strive, and a lifetime goes by and all you've done is create an anxiety disorder. Sometimes I don't know why people laugh when I talk. So
It's the truth.
I think we've all been there, done that. Relaxed too much, got an anxiety disorder. Struggle is real.
Yeah. That said, I will say that euphoria is a very important component of samadhi. So learning how to produce euphoria while doing samadhi practice is a very important step to cultivating deep and powerful samadhi. And I think that's the main thing that the Buddha is pointing to with this sequence. The Buddha is pointing to the fact that cultivating enjoyment, pleasure, and euphoria during one's samadhi practice will greatly accelerate the process. So that's the main thing I would take away from that particular sutta. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Then Awaken the Master says, when the suttas talk about the cessation of perception and feeling, is this a different kind of cessation, or is it a catch-all term for any cessation?
I don't know that I could answer that. So it might be better for you, Bhante.
Okay. So the cessation of perception and feeling is referring to a particular kind of samadhi, which is only accessible to non-returners and arhants. And it's said to be the experience which is as close to direct experience of the Nibbana Dhatu as is possible in this life. So the cessation of perception and feeling, it's as it sounds. All mental activity has completely stopped, and yet one is still alive. So that's what it's referring to. And again, this is only possible for someone who has completely eliminated sensual desire and aversion, which is why it's only accessible to non-returners and arhants. Okay.
Yeah, I thought just arahants. I didn't hear about anagami, but now it makes
There's-
sense
yeah.
because they don't have. Yeah, they've
There's
eliminated the fetters. Yeah.
I'd have to look it up to get the exact references, but there's a handful of suttas where there's non-returners who get this particular samadhi.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. And Hasanta says, a previous answer regarding the 5 khandhas intrigued. I had always thought we were only the 5 khandhas and nothing more, whereas you suggested the 5 khandhas were ways we experience ourselves. Please expand. Oh yeah? Would you like to talk about the 5 khandhas?
Whatever you think you are, you suffer. That's what first comes to mind.
Facts.
That would be my answer. But I think it's related to someone that was talking about this.
No, not me. That's why I thought.
Okay. Maybe it was you.
I might have said something along these lines, but not recently. If I did, it was maybe last week or something.
Mm-hmm.
But So more, it's hazardous to say we are only the 5 khandhas, because then you're still identifying as the 5 khandhas, which I think is what you were pointing to a moment ago, Aya.
Yes.
And so the 5 khandhas it's 5 ways that we experience what we think we are. But that's not what we are. It's more like 5 lenses onto things that we are not. Or another way to look at it is that we have an experience, and you can divide that experience up into 5 pieces, and we call those the 5 khandhas. And the Buddha also gives other ways, like the 6 ayatanas, the 6 sense domains. So you can also take this picture of who we think we are and chop it up into 6 pieces, the 6 ayatanas, or the 6 dhatus, the 6 elements. Is another framework the Buddha uses. So there's a few different ways the Buddha gives to divide up our experience. But these aren't meant to be taken as absolute truths, but rather as frameworks for understanding our experience, so that we can more clearly see that nothing within that framework is who we really are. That's more the point. So the 5 khandhas are not who we are. The 5 khandhas is just one framework for understanding that we're not anything. There is nothing that is me or mine.
Yeah, and I think this is the beauty of Buddhist practice, of the teachings of the Buddha, that he gives us all these frameworks to explore and to actually find out that we even have these assumptions of ourselves, all of these ideas. This is me, this is who I am. Like, for example, as you even phrased this sentence, I had always thought we were only the 5 khandhas. Even when we approach the Dhamma, we're constantly, putting a self. There's something. We're searching for this self. We're like, okay, maybe I'm not the self that I think I am, but there must be this self somewhere. Okay, I am the 5 khandhas. There you go. I found it. And then you're like, wait, I'm not the 5 khandhas. Who am I? And so that's actually what the Buddha is helping us, first of all, and foremost, in allowing us to investigate this process of self-identification with so many different things that in the end we even identify with something as clunky as the 5 aggregates. Right? It's so clunky. If you go to any non-Buddhist person, you're like, hi, I have 5 aggregates, and they'll think you're completely insane. Sounds really bizarre and odd. But yet, we, even as Buddhists, we get very stuck into that. So yes, we should investigate what are these 5 khandhas, but not just in terms of like reading it in a book, but rather through our experience. What does it mean having an experience of the 5 aggregates? And then from there, we start seeing the 3 characteristics of the aggregates and seeing how, well, this is not who I am, this is not me, this is not mine, this is not myself. And we keep on actually questioning. I like doing that part of the investigation. And what is it? What is it? Is there anything else that we're clinging to? It's fun.
Okay. Yeah, Buddhism is fun. Okay. If you don't mind completely shredding everything that you hold dear. So TJ asks.
That's great. I love it.
TJ asks, what is your opinion about arousing joy in the present moment for Samadhi? I think I spoke about that already. That's actually a very important component of Samadhi practice. It's not to be skipped. Rick has another question. He says, I have been listening to several monk chats that were made 2 years ago. My heart was uplifted and I was filled with positive energy and joy when listening to chant the Ratana Sutta.
Aww.
Yeah, I remember we used to chant the Ratana Sutta at the start of our sessions. It was back in the early days of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually Bhante Sanatavahari had recommended we do that.
Yeah, he was here when the whole pandemic started. Yep.
Yeah, I remember. Wow, it feels like ages ago.
It was.
Oh, good point. So Rick asks, can you share some of the benefits of chanting?
Bhante J.
You get to memorize important suttas. Right, like that's to me, that's the best benefit of chanting, right? You really, especially if they're really impactful, to have them in you, right, so that you always have them. Right, this is another reason why I actually like to, when I do morning chantings, I like to do different suttas often. If I'm doing the same suttas over and over and over again, I just kind of just becomes rote to me. Right? I like to practice new suttas, and because to me, chanting is about reflecting on the Dhamma. Right? It's not about how I chant, or it's not about, oh, I'm feeling good because I'm singing or anything like that. It's just that this is the Dhamma, right? And I want to reflect on what I'm reading, what I'm chanting. I mean, obviously there's other benefits. It can uplift you and things like that. But for me, it's about the sutras, right? It's about this is the teaching, and for me to reflect on this teaching, right? To do reflecting on, as I'm chanting, that this is the teaching and this is what I want to. It sets my mind for the day on Dhamma, right? So that's, I guess, would say the biggest benefit for me, at least, for chanting.
One thing I would add to that is the value for communal harmony. So there was an incident my preceptor likes to tell, where they just opened a new hermitage, and there were maybe 3 or 4 monks living there. And they were arguing and quarreling all the time. And so then they contacted Ajahn Pasano, my teacher, and they were like, what can we do about this? Like, we just can't get along. And Ajahn Pasano, the first thing he asked was, are you doing puja together? And they were like, well, no. And Ajahn Pasano was like, well, then you need to do puja together every day. You need to be chanting together every day. And so they started doing puja together and chanting together every day. And within a few days, the problem started to evaporate. So there's something remarkable about group chanting where, for a period of time, you're putting down your usual self-centered way of thinking and acting, and you're actually deliberately trying to get along with another group of people. And it's also about something which we all hold dear, which is the teachings of the Buddha. So it's actually a remarkably powerful practice for cultivating communal harmony. So that's one thing that I would add. And it is important, by the way, when chanting, to remember that we're trying to chant together as a group, as one voice. So it's not a solo performance. It's not 10 people all doing solo performances at the same time. But it's actually a group of people who are all trying to chant with one voice. And if you practice in this way, then it is a really powerful practice.
Yeah, and I will also add that for me, it's also a practice of sadhana, for rising sadhana, for rising faith, especially if I'm listening to the chanting that I really like, actually, that really arises that factor for me is the Thai forest tradition. Actually, not the Thai forest, just Thai chanting, actually, literally. Whether it's forest, urban, doesn't matter. Whether it's Western or Eastern, like I love how like the Western monks of the Ajahn Chah tradition chant, really beautiful. Actually, there's these beautiful recordings of Ajahn Pasano, Ajahn Amaro, and they're offered on the Abhayagiri website that I love. It's really beautiful to listen to the chanting of the community, and also pretty much any Thai monk. Any group of Thai monastics, they have a really beautiful way of chanting that is actually very similar throughout the country. They are trained in that way, and I find it so inspiring. And I am actually like there, yes, awakening right now, yes. So it really delights my heart. And when I'm by myself, so when I'm not listening to other people chanting, but I'm chanting myself, whether it's in a group or alone, it also is really, it's the backbone actually of sadhana. I did this retreat this past winter where I was in a place where I was only with another monastic, and was a Buddhist place, so people weren't really devout Buddhists. They were just kind of practicing, and I was feeling a little bit the odd person. I mean, for clear reasons, but in the Buddhist monastery, I kind of fit in, right? But there, I was just really odd. And there was no group chanting. Actually, there was no chanting at all. There was none of the sort of supports that the tradition had there. There was a meditation hall and a picture of the Buddha, but that was about it. Everything else was lacking. So I was actually just going by myself, morning and evening to chanting by myself. And I was like, probably they were hating me because actually it was by the library where there were some folks meditating. And I remember I would come in the room. There was actually a place that is allocated for chanting. And I would see first like 5 people, all seriously meditating in the library. And then I would like lock myself up in the room, like, Namo Tassa. I would come out and it was deserted. So I don't think it was inspiring much faith in them, but it definitely inspired faith in me. I would do my whole ritual with the incense and everything. It worked for at least one person in the building.
Sadhu. And TJ asks, does the right concentration, Samma Samadhi, in the Noble Eightfold Path have to be the 4 absorptions, the jhanas? In my opinion, yes, because it actually clearly states as much in some places in the suttas. I see some nodding from Bhante J.
No, you say, in your opinion, I'm like, of course, it's like in the suttas, it's right there. Yes.
Yeah.
It's obvious, yeah.
But there's actually a handful of teachers these days who claim otherwise. But to claim otherwise, one needs to contradict the suttas, which always makes me a little bit uncomfortable. So Dharma Learner says, I am seeing myself disengaging from many activities since they are not fitting with Dhamma. I cannot fully commit due to responsibilities and debts. I am finding this a catch-22. My work is suffering, which is causing financial problems and family distress. Should I grin and bear it and wait for another life? The family does not understand, and I am confused about how to proceed since I cannot leave them. Thank you.
Yeah, so, we have responsibilities in life. And this is Bhante Analayo, when I got the chance to meet him for a couple of days years ago. And he said something very, very wise. I was talking to him. He had just come to America after staying and living with his parents for a couple of years, taking care of them. And he said, I was talking to him about a couple different things. And he said something. He said, a meditator takes care of the responsibilities that they already have and does not create new ones. Right? So a wise, responsible meditator, like, okay, well, this is a good thing that I should do. I should take care of these responsibilities, right? I shouldn't try to shirk them. I shouldn't try to pass them off, or because I'm going to be a meditator and become a monk instead, right? That's kind of going against the path in a way, right? It's like the Buddha says that there are 2 kinds of fools. The first fool is a person who does not take up a responsibility that is theirs. And the second kind of fool is a person who takes up a responsibility that is not theirs. Right. So the Buddha is, the Buddha in the suttas is quite clear. If you have responsibilities, you should take care of those responsibilities. If you need to, if ordination is something that you want to work towards, well, then start setting goals, start setting, if you have debts or if you things you need to do, start working towards that. And if it doesn't work out in this lifetime, it doesn't. Or if it works out when you become, when you get, you're free when you're older, and then you can go to Asia and ordain or something, who knows? But yeah, just because, in my opinion, the wisdom that comes from the progression on the path would actually, that person would feel worse. They would feel it was almost like immoral to start just throwing away their responsibilities because they want to be practitioners instead. It reminds me of people who come to the monastery and they're like, I have to work? What do you mean? I have to do all this stuff? I just want to sit in Samadhi all day. And I'm like, no wisdom there. right? Like, yes. So take care of your responsibilities that are yours and work towards your goals.
Great. Rick asks, can we study the Ratana Sutta in an upcoming Sutta study? We'd actually done it a couple of years ago. So if you look on our YouTube channel, there should be a Ratana Sutta from a couple of years ago. But generally speaking, if anyone has sutta suggestions, they can send it to the monastery email, and you might see it in an upcoming session.
Have you done the Mangala Sutta?
I believe so.
I think so.
That's important.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't want to say that you can.
Yeah, most of the major, like most commonly
Aritas.
chanted suttas, we've done study sessions on at one point or another.
If you also have any topics, general topics that you would like for the monastics to discuss, also on the Sangha panel, you're welcome to send an email to info@emptycloud.org.
Next Friday,
PSA.
next Thursday and Friday mornings, humorous suttas.
They're all humorous. Like actually everyone that starts with, there are two kinds of fools.
Yeah, it's
Those
great.
always get me. I'm just like, and actually a lot of the suttas, to be honest, I can almost see the Buddha having this kind of like little smug grin of kind of like, I'm getting the joke. Are you guys getting the joke?
No, they're like fishmongers at a fish market.
So Nico says, can you get to see your friends in Buddhist Rebirth? Yes. In fact, you've seen them 100,000,000 times over and over and over again, to the point where you got absolutely sick of them and they stopped being your friends. And then you made new ones who you saw 100,000,000 times and got sick of them too. So you made new ones and you got sick of them too. And then you went back to the old ones and you got sick of them again, and repeat. And here you are again, doing the same damn thing over and over and over and over again, pretending it's new each time.
Good news with Bandhisuddhas.
Reality check.
You also get to see your enemies over and over again, by the way. And sometimes the enemies become friends and the friends become enemies and so on.
And they're all your mother.
That too. And you were their mothers. We're all each other's mothers.
I think there was a.
It's enough to want to escape
there?
samsara.
This one? This one?
No, it's just a comment. It's
Oh,
no
okay,
question. Yeah. We also take questions from the monastery residents, by the way. So if you have some... Oh, go ahead.
Elliot.
Yeah, I was wondering where on the question about the man struggling, or the person struggling with responsibilities versus wanting to practice, what are the grounds for discerning that? Because from what I remember the story of the Buddha, he had to leave his pregnant wife. Obviously, there was no Dhamma, and he was the Buddha to become the Buddha. So extraordinary circumstances. But what's the difference between kind of parents who are very attached to you versus having a child very attached to you, or having a pet? I think I remember reading an article a while back that was a transcript to talk about Ajahn Chah, specifically saying not to be attached to pets and this and that, while still being a kind, generous person in your daily life.
So I think one of the things about the story of the Buddha leaving behind his wife and his newborn child was they were members of an extremely wealthy and powerful aristocratic family. They were okay. Trust me, they were fine. So it's not like he was leaving them to die in poverty. They were fine. And also keeping in mind that, again, as you mentioned, the Buddha was setting out to attain awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. So I don't actually see that as him shirking responsibilities. It was actually him fulfilling his deepest and most important responsibility. And also remembering that then one of the first things he did after attaining awakening was he went back and he taught the Dhamma to his ex-wife and his child. And both of them became arhats. So actually, I think that that's a really beautiful story of somebody who does the absolute best they can. But I think more about shirking responsibilities. It's more like, let's say that you actually do have a child and there is nobody to take care of them. You don't just like walk away and just leave them to starve to death while you go off to become a monk. That would actually be phenomenally cruel. That would be starting off, your monastic life with an extremely heavy bad karma. Or actually, if you have a cat and you're just like, well, okay, Fluffy, you're going to die now. Bye. Well, that's not compassion. That's just cruelty. So that's more what I would take in terms of discarding one's responsibilities. So in that case, the proper thing to do is make sure there's someone who will take care of the cat. And if there's nobody who you think is going to take care of the cat, then actually you do have a responsibility to take care of it. When you take on a cat, or when you have a child, or when you get in a relationship, you actually are taking on responsibilities. And if you want to get out of those responsibilities, you need to do so in as harmless a way as possible. And yeah, that's not necessarily something you can do quickly or easily. If you want to extract yourself from a major responsibility like that, then you need to do so very carefully, in as harmless a way as possible.
Another example of funny in the suttas. Go, son, get your inheritance from your father. You're ordained. That was the Buddha's ex-wife said to Rahula, go, when he saw the Buddha, go, get your inheritance from your father. And the son goes up to the Buddha, and the Buddha says, okay, now you're a monk.
Hey, Bhikkhu.
And of course, the grandfather was not too happy about it.
Okay.
This
There's
true?
Well, I mean, there's some other questions first, but this is somewhat on topic.
Yeah.
Jay Kala says, in the Udana, an arhat left his child unattended to die when his wife was angry until she came to pick him up. Is that in the Udana itself, or is that in the Udana commentary?
Sounds like a commentary story.
And Jay Kala says, knowing she would come save the child, of course, without any ill will. Yeah, well, actually, I think you answered your own question there. So the arhat, in this case, it was someone who knew that the person was just trying to play a trick on him, but that there was no seriousness to it. So it sounds to me more like a wise person seeing through a petty attempt by somebody else to manipulate them. So again, that's a very different situation from somebody shirking their responsibilities. Jay Kala says it's in the Udana itself. Okay. It's been a while since I've read the Udana, so maybe I just don't remember this particular story. If you can give us the reference, I'd like to have a look at it again and see if I can get a clearer picture of what's going on there. So, and Anjan says, is there a sutta where the Buddha discussed mindful listening? Also, how does mindful, non-judgmental listening help a person in distress? Yeah.
Is there a sutta where the Buddha discussed mindful listening? Also, how does mindful, non-judgmental listening help a person in distress? Well, I mean, definitely the Buddha encourages over and over again. I can't remember on the top of my head the exact suttas, but definitely, for example, whenever we're listening to the Dhamma, the Buddha says that we should listen to the Dhamma as if it was a vital concern. Do we actually do that? A lot of times we're like, I'm planning, I have to do this and I have to do that. And I'm like, oh, what is the monk saying again? What did Bhante say? Or like, what did I even read? So yeah, it's very difficult to do mindful listening, mindful reading, mindful anything. To keep actually mindfulness in every single moment, it's very difficult. It's a really high bar. We have lots of high bars in Buddhism, but definitely that's essentially what we're trying to develop. Samasati is mindfulness in every single moment. Mindfulness, also mindful listening. Not that we're just mindful of everything else except for the ears. The ears, we're just shutting them off. And when it comes to non-judgmental listening, well, it's very difficult most of the time. Actually, whenever people are talking, if they're in distress, I think there's something that happens in all of us that we have a really hard time dealing with our own dukkha, and definitely the dukkha of others, that then in that moment becomes ours too. And we just want to fix it so badly. So sometimes we just are not even listening to what the person has to say. We have all these like different medicines for them. But instead of like even doing the diagnosis, we're kind of like this sort of a really cheap doctor. Like, oh, maybe this will help and this will help. And we're kind of like throwing supplements and like heavy drugs at them, trying to like really, I think, kind of really release our own suffering rather than their suffering. And sometimes actually the person just wants to vent. Maybe the person just needs someone to lend an ear. And that's the appropriate time. The appropriate response is just to be there and listen. I remember there was a lady that came here one day a while back, several months ago. Was the first time that she had come to the monastery. And it was right after lunch. And the only thing I wanted to do, to be quite frank, was to go and take a nap because I had just had a really heavy meal, actually. And the person was in distress and she wanted to take a walk. And I was like, all right, let's take a walk around the monastery. And then it turned out to be a walk around almost the entire town of West Orange. It was about like an hour walk in which I think I spoke 1% of the time. And the person was extremely grateful afterwards. And I remember thinking that actually she had taught me something very powerful. That sometimes all you need to do is actually listen to someone. And that's a form of dana, a form of giving, a form of caring, a form of like really being there present. And it really touched me, you know. I was like, wow, I really don't want to do this, but I'll do this. Like, you know, I had no vested sort of interest in the life of this person, but I was like, okay, let me do it. Let me just be present. And I was. And there was no dukkha for the hour, by the way. The dukkha was before. It was like, oh dear, I really don't want to do this. And as I did it, it was actually quite interesting because you're only bored when you're not mindful. You're only suffering when you're not mindful. So I was there present, listening to every single word that the person had to say. And it was okay for both of us. It was really great.
And Nico asks, can off-grid or lonely people gain a state of nirvana?
I mean, it depends on your conditions, depends on your practice, depends on a lot of different things. I mean, most monasteries that are in the woods are technically off-grid. I mean, at least with some utility or another. I think of Aya Santusika and Aya Chittananda over in California. They're really off-grid, right? So like off-grid doesn't necessarily mean that you can't practice or have contact with people and have connections. Yeah, I guess, yeah. So, anybody can attain Nibbana who's practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, and the causes and conditions are right.
And Jay Kala says, Bhante Sudaso, could you explain your stance on not intervening in harm being bad karma? To me, if there's no greed, aversion, or delusion when choosing not to act, it would not be bad karma. Thanks. Well, actually, it comes from several places in the suttas where the Buddha says that there's two kinds of bad karma, so unwholesome action. So one is doing what should not be done, and the other is not doing what should be done. So the second is a very clear example where the Buddha directly states that inaction can be bad karma. So you're choosing to not do something when you see that there is something good or wholesome that should be done, and you choose not to do it. So your statement, if there's no greed, aversion, or delusion when choosing not to act, well, no greed, aversion, or delusion would mean that one recognizes that there is not something wholesome which needs to be done. So the delusion is when, for example, you're watching somebody being harmed right in front of you, and the delusion is thinking, I don't need to do anything about this. That's delusion. Or it might be greed. Greed of, well, I can't be bothered. I'm just want to keep my own time. Or aversion, like I don't want to get involved in that annoying situation. So greed, aversion, or delusion is actually usually the excuses we use for not doing anything. This actually comes from the commentaries. The commentaries invented this idea of the impassive arhat who would just stand by and watch their mother drown in a river. But this doesn't have anything to do with anything you'll see anywhere in the suttas. It's entirely a commentarial fabrication, which I don't know where they get it from, because it actually contradicts what the Buddha says.
I just wanted to say also that inaction can be also good karma. Like non-harming, not killing, not stealing. So there is actually something really perplexing to me when people say that inaction is not an act of karma, because actually it can be both good karma or bad karma depending on what exactly we're not acting upon.
Yeah, like being lazy. It's good karma.
Wait,
what?
The Buddha says there's one time where being lazy is where one should be lazy.
Oh, what's the one time?
And not acting in a bad Dhamma and discipline. Like
Ah.
one should be lazy to kill and to harm and to
Right.
That's the only time the Buddha approves of laziness.
Yeah, or when he approves of killing. Killing, greed, hatred, and delusion.
Yeah, I like that. One should be lazy in a bad Dhamma.
Yeah.
That's good. I approve. So Sin says, seeing the same friends and enemies again 1,000 times over. So it's metta and being able to love everyone equally and not perceiving any as enemies that leads to nirvana.
Well, I would not. I have to put an issue with the word love right here. So metta is not like you're not going to love everybody, but you can have goodwill towards everybody, right? So when you have like true metta, limitless goodwill, you have an equanimous mind towards all beings. It's not like I have goodwill towards beings I like and goodwill towards beings I don't like. It's simply that all beings are siblings in samsara. We're all suffering in samsara. And then we have, we have the wisdom and understanding that there's no need for me to judge other beings. There's no need for me to, overly, go out of my way to harm or to dislike other beings, or even necessarily to like other beings. You can have an equanimous mind. We don't want to be too attached, nor do we want to be, nor do we want to be averse. When somebody who becomes awakened, they understand, they have that totally equanimous, limitless goodwill, limitless compassion for all beings without distinction.
And Rick says, I've spent many years doing my best to live mindfully in the present moment. What is a healthy way to relate to the vast expanses of time that we or others might live in heaven or hell realms?
Well, thank you, Bhante, for passing me this question. Well, first of all, great that you're doing your best to live mindfully in the present moment. That's wonderful. And a healthy way to relate to the vast expanses of time that we or others might live in heaven or hell realms. I don't know. I don't really think too much about it because I am very much focused on, awakening in this lifetime. So paradoxically, actually, when I started, quote unquote, believing in rebirth, I don't like the word belief, but for lack of better words, I'm going to use the word believe. When I started believing in rebirth, actually, I started having this kind of like anxiety of being reborn. Paradoxically, when I was more in the framework of YOLO, you only live once, it was kind of like a relief. Like whenever I was like, oh, this sucks. And I was like, oh, but at least it's going to end, at a certain point. But then when I started seeing it in the form of rebirth, I was like, oh dear, this is never going to end. This is horrible. This is terrible. And even if I go to a heavenly realm, then I'm going to be even more deluded. And like, oh dear, I'm going to be stuck there in eons. And then I'm going to go to hell because I'm going to be so full of myself, which was actually kind of an insight that I also had to remember when I was 17 years old. At a certain point, my parents shipped me to Australia for the summer. I was actually a very unhappy teenager in Italy, but when I went to Australia at the age of 17 for those 3 months, it seemed to me like paradise. It was heavenly. Like everybody, I was the popular kid. I don't know. I wasn't really popular in Italy apparently at that time, but I was really popular in Australia, and everything was really, really great. And at a certain point, I remember becoming like really kind of, how do you say, full of myself. I was like, oh yeah, I'm like so cool. Yeah, like, oh look, yeah, so popular. No, sorry, I don't have time. And I remember thinking with this realization, oh wow, maybe I'm like, it's kind of good that I was born not the most popular kid in Italy, because actually I'm becoming a really awful person now that I'm in this condition of being, like in a more privileged sort of situation. So this thought actually appeared in my mind in the context of rebirth. I was like, I'm so totally going to be an obnoxious deva. Like, oh yeah, like so great. I'm so much better than all of those people there, like those humans, those idiots. And then of course, then bam, you get into the hell realm. And so I don't know. So healthy way to relate, just focus on stream entry. Stream entry, like when you think about Nibbana, you're like, wow, I mean, eliminating greed, hatred, and delusion, it's really, intense. But stream entry, it's really doable. It's actually really doable. Like we can do it, and it's irreversible. Like then there is, I got like 7 more shots and that's it. And then you're done, you're guaranteed. So yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
And Julie says, the more I am on the path, the more I feel like I am being inauthentic at work in my interactions with colleagues. I am being polite and keep it to a minimum. Any thoughts?
Well, why do you feel like you're being inauthentic? I mean, is it because you're not feeling as excited to be in contact with your colleagues? I mean, needs a little bit more context, but I'm going to go with that. Like, it's just that I feel like I'm being inauthentic at work in my interactions with colleagues. I am being polite and keeping it to a minimum. Any thoughts? Just be mindful in your interactions, right? When you have an interaction with colleagues, be mindful. Don't contribute to any wrong speech that might be going on. Just observe it, and like you say, keep it to a minimum. That's fine. This is being. I feel like I'm being inauthentic. You're living in the world. You have to act in the world. It's not. Yeah.
Are people ever authentic at work?
Well, it depends on the person. Most people probably.
I was.
No.
Okay. I mean, I was pretty authentic about not being interested in my work.
Well, I mean, there is if you're in a job you hate, then obviously it has nothing to do with your progress on Dhamma. That's just, you just don't want to be there.
Fun fact, I actually did work for about a year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Where did you work?
It's beside the point.
Oh, I'm sorry. And so Anita Metico wants to say something.
I was just going to say, I usually feel something similar at work. For a time, I wouldn't say like good morning to people because I felt like I was lying. I was like, oh, I'm going to follow the precepts and not say hi. And then I realized I was just being a jerk. And like metta and just being kind is so much more important. That's being authentic, is being kind. So, and people responded surprisingly much better when I would actually like practice metta, be authentic.
Yeah,
your true self is kind.
You can be social and a practitioner. It's
right.
Not like you don't. As a matter of fact, as Samanera Metiko says, it's perfect practice for metta. Exactly. Good,
yeah.
Good.
Also in the suttas, what comes to mind is actually in the suttas, whenever people approach the Buddha, they always do a cordial talk, like the Buddha also does cordial talk with them. So that's kind of like the preliminary to then actually the juice of the Dhamma. And it's pretty much, it's a recurrent kind of theme of cordial talk, which I think actually is pointing out to the fact that we also need to generate this kind of care, which is not small talk, but it's actually a way of caring for, demonstrating that we care for other sentient beings. Actually similar to what Bhante J was saying also that he was doing at the monastery, like saying hello to people, addressing them, connecting with them, which is very different than going like, hey, yo, like, let's go and like watch the movies together. You know, it's like that's different. But you can acknowledge people, you can converse with them, and yeah, take this as an opportunity. It's so great. Every day you have different people, different sentient beings that you see at work that you haven't chosen, and that you can practice loving kindness with. You can practice all the different, you can practice mudita, you can rejoice for all the promotions that they get and you don't get. It's great. Very incredible practice. You can practice compassion, and you can practice equanimity when they're completely annoying. Yeah, fantastic. So that's when you keep it authentic. You're like, this is, the human condition. We all need a livelihood. We're all here to get our livelihood met, and we all want to be happy.
If you guys maybe remember when I would come to Buddhist Insights and I would do the metta retreat when you were in New York City, I would force people to go out on the street and do walking meditation. And I would say, well, don't just be like, you just like walk past the person like, oh, I'm being meditating. I said, no, like say hello, talk to them. And I'm sure that shocked a bunch of people, but like, this is part of meditation in action, right? Saying hello to people, just random people on the street. Go out in the street, practice metta, practice meditation. That's, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Bhante. Actually, that's a very good point.
Great. And Julie also asks, are there different kinds of nibbana, or are all the experiences of nibbana cessation? So there are not different kinds of nibbana. So there's only one. So there's not variation there. I'm not totally clear what you mean by are all the experiences of nibbana cessation. So nibbana, one of the ways the Buddha defines nibbana is that it's the absence of great hatred and delusion, if that's what you mean. So it depends on what exactly you mean by that. But briefly speaking, there's only one kind of nibbana. There's not more than one. And Nico asks, does Buddhist state that killing people can still be forgiven to gain a state of nirvana?
What?
If you've killed people, can you still attain nirvana?
Does this ask that?
I think that's what this person is asking. Killing people can be
still forgiven to gain a state, like you're killing someone in order to attain nibbana?
No, I think they're asking if you've killed someone in the past, can that still be forgiven so you can gain a state of nirvana?
Well, if that's what you're asking, then of course there's famous Angulimala. So yes, potentially anyone can attain nibbana if they put all the conditions in place. This being said, if you actually intentionally commit something that is against the Dhamma with the knowledge of the Dhamma, and then you think that just by making some intentional good deeds, you're watering down that karma, well, it's not working that way. So in the case of Angulimala, actually, whatever he had done was because he had a lot of wrong view and unawareness of the Dhamma, and then by meeting the Buddha obviously taught him the Dhamma, was capable of teaching him, of telling him exactly what he needed to hear in that moment in order to see the Dhamma and correct his view. And that's why he was able to attain awakening. But it's not that before that he had a knowledge of what was supposed to be correct and not correct.
And Nico has a follow-up to this. Can they pray to repent to Buddha when they killed Jem? I assume you mean when they killed them. I mean, you can pray to repent all you like, but you still will experience the harmful consequences of your bad deeds. So, yeah, it's not as simple as that. So you can't just like go out and kill someone and then be like, dear Buddha, please forgive me. And you go out and you kill somebody else. Dear Buddha, forgive that one too. And you go out and you kill some more people. Dear Buddha, please forgive those. Like, you still are racking up a gigantic stockpile of bad karma that's going to burn you really badly. And the fact that, and also I really question how much you're actually repenting. So genuine repentance is when you recognize that you did something really bad and you vow to not do it ever again. And then you actually do your best to stick to that. So for repentance to actually have any karmic weight, it needs to be genuine. There needs to be a genuine determination to change your behavior and to not do those bad things anymore. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything.
And Nico has another follow-up he says, how do you repent and gain back karma after you cheated or killed people or divorce? And Sin says, don't do it, Nico.
Sin has answered the question. That's good enough.
Yes, it's great because this was a question and an answer from Sin, which reminded me actually of the poem from Bhikkhuni Pudna. That gives exactly that teaching to the Brahmin who is there trying to purify all their misdeeds in the water by washing the deeds. And Teri in the Terigata goes up to the Brahmin and basically, first inquires, what the hell are you doing? And as the Brahmin explains their theory of purifying these bad deeds with the water, then Bhikkhuni Purna points out how, well, then if the water can purify your bad deeds, then it can also purify your good deeds. So that makes no sense. So if you actually just want purity, well, just don't do that bad deed to begin with. So that is also something so human, I have to say. We see 2,500 years later, we all get back into the same kind of thing, or like, oh, how can I repent? Yes, I can repent with these bad deeds, or like self-flagellate afterwards. Just don't do it.
Yeah, it's very Christian language. There's no like repentance in Buddhism. There's no forgiveness in this of like karma. There's no karmic judge up in the sky that's going to do that. It's just, you are your actions and you've done them. And until you become a fully extinguished, awakened being, you're going to have the conditions to experience those. So you just have to do as much good karma and practice as much good deeds as possible. Follow the path.
But also recognize that even if you do a bunch of good karma, you will still experience the consequences of whatever bad things you've done. Mm-hmm. That doesn't go away. And also one little nitpick is you put divorce on your list, but I actually haven't seen anywhere in the sutras where the Buddha ever says that divorce is bad karma. So I don't know where you got that one from. That's not Buddhism.
Yeah, or that marriage is good karma.
Yeah, it's just not there. Yeah, what the Buddha does say is that cheating on your partner is bad karma. Sexually assaulting people is bad karma. But divorce, not necessarily, no. Nope. And we do have one question here from Rick. He says, is there a way to become aware of what is still blocking us from stream entry, developing an understanding of what steps we need to take?
I think Bhante J hasn't spoken in a while.
The steps you need to take to become a stream enter is to follow the Noble Eightfold Path. Like along the path, you will kind of, if you're really in tune with your mind and your body and you're really observing your path, you will know that there's certain times, there's certain things to focus on more. Like even though, me and Samadhi and sitting for long periods of time are not the best of friends, I've just had experiences where it's like, okay, now I need to sit longer, right? I know that this is a time, I can feel it, I can see it in my practice, that the causes and conditions are there, right? So the deeper you go into your path, the wiser you get, the more you understand the mind and body and the path itself, then you will be able to mindfully clue in to what you need to do. Like this is one of those things where like you see various examples of like stream enters who basically know, like they know they're stream enters and they know they're close and they basically are just totally focused on becoming awakened. Like an example of this is like Ajahn Mun, right? In Ajahn Mun's biography, you have all these examples of like monks coming and staying with him and then him disappearing in the night, trying to be by himself so he can finish his practice, right? Because he knew what he needed to do, right? So, the path, if you're intuitive and understanding and wise, then the path will show you what you need to do.
Okay. And Rick has a question. Frequently when I meditate, my heart fills with love and joy, a smile brightens my face, and I feel greater peace as I listen to the gentle snoring of my 3 great Pyrenees. Is this dog breath meditation, metta meditation, or focusing on the fur element?
Probably the fur element.
I was going to go for metta in this one.
I like dog breath meditation. That's pretty great.
Anyway, the important thing is, does it help? If it helps, then keep doing it. Do you have a question?
Yeah. I'm wondering if there's ever where you can go too far down a path of dana or service, like kind of where you're not necessarily depleting yourself, but you're forsaking spending longer time in meditation, cultivating concentration. Because I know concentration is a very essential part of the path. Is there any roadmap to that?
I think for most people, that's just an excuse to not practice generosity. I know lots of people who they are very focused on doing meditation, but they're also extremely egotistic and self-centered. And even their meditation practice is an expression of that. They're like, I am doing my meditation for my own good, and screw all these other people. They can figure things out on their own. But they're actually just building up their own egotism. And actually people like that, they would actually do quite well to do less meditation and spend more time practicing generosity. So, but yeah, there are also examples of people who they actually do very little meditation, and maybe their generosity practice is well developed, but they would do well to do more meditation practice because that's what's lacking. So I think more it's a question of, as Bhante Jay was saying, to look at your own practice and just see what's actually lacking and needs to be built up. So actually there's kind of one of the general stereotypes that tends to come up is that Western convert Buddhists tend to be too focused on meditation and not enough on generosity and morality. Whereas people who are from Buddhist cultures tend to be quite aware of the value of generosity and morality, but generally don't do very much meditation. And of course, these are not universal truths, but there's a certain amount of truth to it. So it's about looking at your practice. What do you need to work on?
Just a brief follow-up. So with the situation with ISO, I'm aware you took the walk with the person who wanted to listen, you just wanted to take a nap. I assume that the general rule of thumb is err on the side of, I don't really want to be there and do this thing right now, but as long as it isn't harming me, kind of go towards that.
I would say that when there is aversion in the mind, then that's when you have to do the work. So honestly, then the problem is mine. It's not the person. So you actually can see it. You can tell the difference. In that case, yeah, the mind was veering towards self-centeredness. Like, I want to do this. I don't want to be bothered doing this, etc., etc. So then the appropriate response is actually, this is a great opportunity for practice. This is a great way for me to develop non-hatred, developing the paramis. And there's other times where instead the mind does not have hatred present in the mind, does not have different defilements, but rather you just acknowledge, right now it's the time for Samadhi. Right now it's the time to do whatever it is. I really like the Zen saying, what is a teaching of a lifetime? An appropriate response. And essentially, this is what we kind of need to cultivate, an appropriate response in any given circumstance, not a copy and paste response. Like, oh, whenever someone comes at the door after lunch, I say no, or I say yes, or I take like an hour, We like to have that type of sort of manual of, put it on Excel and you have the magic answer. But unfortunately, it's not like that. We need to develop the wisdom to understand what is appropriate, what is beneficial for ourselves and others in every circumstance. And then that creates growth in Dhamma. Because honestly, if in that moment, I had just followed my desire to go and take a nap and not care about that person, I would have just fueled my self-centeredness. I would have just fueled my aversion. And I would have not cultivated Samadhi. There's one thing, actually, getting back to what Bhante Sudhazo was referring to in terms of like kind of the stereotypes of Eastern versus Western. Eastern, like cultivating a lot of dana paramis, etc., and Western people cultivating a lot of meditation practice. Is that from my experience now running this organization and doing lots of retreats, and not too much these days because of the pandemic, but beforehand we used to do so many retreats. But even now, when different people that are born Buddhists come and practice meditation, maybe they're for the first time, or they hadn't meditated in so long, or even if they're children, actually, they're children, like the 14-year-old girls that started practicing the last weekend for 3 hours, bam, they sit like rocks. It's incredible. Like, it's really fascinating how pretty much any average Western 99% of people who have not practiced dana will have a really hard time the first moments, like fidgeting. I definitely had that struggle. It took me quite some time. But the like 99% of people who have practiced dana, they're included, actually. Just incredible, like natural. All her sisters, all her family, her brother as well. Like, just we get right into it.
Yeah, my younger sister, she stayed for like 5 days here, and she was like automatic. Like, I was like, when I came, I was like fidgeting in the first few days, but like she wasn't even expecting to stay for even a night. And like she just came and did the full retreat, and like I was so amazed.
So there is something. So we tend to think that we're so smart, in the West, that we like skip all the whatever things that they do in temples, and we go to like the wisdom practices, etc. Well, actually, that's a manifestation of ignorance. There is something to say that it's a tradition of 2,500 years that has produced enlightened beings. Well, maybe they know a little bit more how to get to that end result. So So I would say we should practice dana as much as possible.
So just to cover when you brought up the example of Aya, I was picking up on something or kind of where you're trying to focus. And so, yes, this one person came, and Aya already kind of talked about her struggle, like to get it done. But then the difference is, what happens if 5 people like that come a day, every day? Right? That obviously like one person can't do that much, right? So then you need some kind of balance, and you need like I'll use myself as an example. I was so busy sharing Dhamma and doing things for other people for the last couple of years I was at Bhavana that I had no time for my own practice. My own practice went like that, right? So you have to know that balance, and you have to know your limitations. You have to know, like, I can't just spend all day, going on 2-mile walks with every single person who wants to come to the monastery and do it. I can't. There's no physical possible way I can do it. But I can do as much as I can and know my limits and balance.
Okay, Nico says, what does the Buddha think of getting arrested? Well, there's an important thing to keep in mind, which is that the secular laws of a nation are not necessarily a perfect match for good and bad karma. So sometimes you can actually be a completely wholesome, upright, good person, and yet you still get arrested. And sometimes you can be a really bad, awful, terrible, evil person and not get arrested. So clearly, whether or not you get arrested is not a direct correlate to how good a person you are. So I wouldn't get too caught up on this. But generally speaking, if you can avoid getting arrested while also being a good person, that's generally the best option. And Hasanta asks, Angulimala was killed as a result of his bad karma, but did not suffer as he was an arhat. So is the karma vipaka circumstances to enable your suffering to happen, not the suffering itself? Yes, that's exactly correct. So Angulimala he was violently attacked several times. Even after he became fully awakened, he was violently attacked several times. And the Buddha was quite clear that yes, this is the direct consequence of your past bad karma of killing people, killing a lot of people. But as you say, Angulimala did not suffer because his mind was completely purified. He was completely awakened. So he himself was not bothered by this, even though he was experiencing pain and ostracism and all the things that would normally be upsetting to people. It was not upsetting to Angulimala because he was an arhat. So that's correct. You have it exactly right.
I actually quite like the phrasing that you picked.
Let's see.
Asanta. Karma circumstances to enable your suffering to happen, not the suffering itself, is really great.
Yeah.
I'm going to steal that, by the way.
And Nico asks again, how do you get back the karma when you got cheated, killed, divorced? Do good things, don't do bad things. Okay. Jaykala says, do you think sharing merit with dead relatives after meditation and meritorious deeds is supported by the suttas? It seems very wholesome mentally, but I'm not sure it actually works. It is supported by the suttas, yeah.
At least in terms of a direct connection, that one sutta, the Buddha says it, at least if they're in the Peta realm, that they can have a direct, you can have a direct impact. But there's also that whole idea of devas, like beings saying, rejoicing in your good deeds. So yeah, like that. I mean, I think that there's some modern conceptions of sharing and transferring merit that don't match with the suttas, that go a little bit too far. But there's at least a basis and an understanding that this is an ancient tradition that predates the Buddha, because you have Brahmins coming to the Buddha and asking about it.
Yeah, so briefly speaking, yes, it works. Keep doing it. Also, if it feels wholesome mentally, then that means it's working, at least for one person, namely you.
I think it's a good thing in terms of like people in all cultures, people do good things in remembrance of people that they've lost, right? At the very least, it's that. At the very least, it's in memory of this person, I'm going to do something good, right? That's not just Buddhist. That's in many, many cultures, right? In Christianity, they have a mass said, they give some donations, and different religions do different things. So it's at the very least, think of it as doing something good in honor of somebody.
Yeah, and the Buddha also says that it is more than just that. So yeah, I do think it's supported by the suttas. And that's actually the last question from online, but we still have about 5 minutes if there's any last questions from the monastery residents. Or if there's nothing, yes, go ahead.
I wanted to ask, what are some ways you can be more appreciative of the things that you have? I feel like it's something that you can overlook.
It's your turn.
Oh, I feel like I spoke a lot.
So do I.
I can speak.
Okay.
So the Buddha says that there is one person who is rare in the world, person who is first in helping others and who is grateful. So the Buddha is telling us that gratitude is not a normal thing. Like, we don't normally have gratitude. It's actually something you have to work for, right? Because we become so, we take things for granted. Like the fact that we can go in a room and flip on a switch and get electricity, right? There's so many things that we take for granted. And I think that one of the ways that you can reflect on this is, like, the Buddha will give examples of, you see somebody who is suffering, right? And you reflect on, I too have been in that situation, right? The Buddha gives you all these kind of contemplative things to reflect on the fact that, actually, because of my good karma, because of whatever, I'm actually doing okay. Yeah, I mean, I have struggles, et cetera, but it could be a lot worse. Right. So it's always kind of that reflection of, I could be in a hell realm right now. Right. Like reflecting, like I could be this, I could be that, like really having gratitude for the fact that, you are human, right? You're born a human being. You're born that you can hear the Dhamma, that you can practice the Dhamma. You reflect on so instead of like the mind state normally is, I don't have this, they have that. How come I don't have that? Right? You flip that around by saying, oh, I have this, I have that. Right? This is amazing. I'm so happy that I have this. Right? This is when I talk about like, when people lose loved ones, right? One of the things that I think if you do the process, the grieving process right, one of the things that happens is your loss gets replaced with gratitude, right? You're not really sad anymore, but you're grateful that the person was in your life, right? So it's a reflection of understanding what you have and reflecting on what you have. It's kind of like how there's sila nusati, right? Reflecting on our good deeds. There's no mitra nusati. There's no reflecting on our bad deeds because we don't need to. Our mind is doing that already all the time, right? So we don't have to reflect on what we don't have because our mind is doing that all the time. Keeping up with the Joneses, right? Or the Fernandos or whatever you want to say, right? Keeping up with the person. Oh, well, I want that. Why don't I have that? They don't, but who know? I don't know. They probably don't even have good karma. How come they have that? Right? Right? All these kind of things. And you reflect, oh, well, wait a second. It's like, I'm happy with what I have. Right? Like, it could be much worse. Right? And sometimes it does take like, in all honesty, like, I knew I had a pretty good life growing up. I mean, I had my struggles and I had my losses and things like that. But then once I started working Child Protective Services, I realized, oh, I have no right to ever complain about my life ever. Right? Like I had experiences with people who were like, oh, yeah, that's rough. Right? So like when you actually kind of have those experiences of seeing other people's experiences, then it makes it a little bit easier to do that reflection as well. So go volunteer, go do hospice or something. That's another way of doing it. Like actually going out in the world and seeing that even though you have your struggles and your problems, you also have lots of blessings. Mangala Sutta, right? All those blessings.
Okay, and we have one last question from online, so I think this will be the last one of the evening. Nico, who's a source of many questions today, says, is planting marijuana bad for karma/Buddha? Is not removing grass weed never earn a karma? I have to say, I don't understand the second question at all. But the first one, remember that karma ultimately is always intention. So why are you doing what you're doing? So you gave the specific example of marijuana. Well, marijuana has a long history of medicinal usage, medicinal purposes. So it also has a long history of being used as an intoxicant. So the question is, why are you planting it? Are you planting it with the intention of helping to produce medicines that will cure people and make people live happier and healthier lives? Or are you planting it in order to produce intoxicants that will make people blurry-minded and confused and further from awakening? So you can do the same action, but with different intentions and therefore be producing different karma. And I really don't understand the second question at all. So I think since we're out of time, we might just skip it. Oh, Cindy says, thank you for the terrazine I got in the mail today. That's very lovely. So actually, we had a volunteer here at the monastery who mailed out some terrazines recently. So glad you liked it. And we should go ahead and wrap up at this time because we're out of time.
Or maybe you can just address that. We have 1 minute, one Zen answer.
Jay Kala says, could an arhat dedicate the merit of a meritorious deed despite not making any merit themselves? Would it be correct to assume people could still rejoice in the deed in their honor and make merit? I would say yes. Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
All right. So that's all for tonight. Thank you all for joining us this evening and for asking all these great questions. You can do that every Friday at 7:30 p.m. New York City time. And next week, if all goes well, we'll have actually a special guest, Aya Santusiga Bikuni from California. Well, originally from Austria, but she lives in California these days, who will be joining us. And if you're around the monastery this weekend, you're welcome to participate in all the different meditation programs that we have throughout. All right, so hope to see you soon, and may you all be well and happy. May all good things come to you.
Sadhu, sadhu.